Welcome to Comment Commentary, which is slowly but surely becoming one of my more favorite videos to do on this channel. Again, if you aren't familiar, this is the video series where I respond to your comments on the videos of the week to keep kind of a conversation alive about the content that I've made this week. I think it's a good way to, I make so many videos. Like I make a video almost every day, and it's real easy to, let something I want to talk about kind of like pass the mind because it's another video that I upload. So this is another way to keep the conversation alive. First video of the week that I want to talk about is the commentary is Jimmy Haslam buying up land to get a new stadium. And Ed Alexander had an interesting comment. He said the west parking lot has not been used in the last 2 years. And you got the west dock right next to it. Hugh Lot could start building it in one of these two spots. The stadium would probably run north to south instead of east to west, and build one like Lucas Oil Center structure, only make it resemble a doghouse with its roof like a doghouse or something retractable to it. I don't think it's going to be retractable, but I think Bill Jack Dog Food Co. is still in Cleveland, so get them to help put a name there on it or build a dome like Big Dog Food Bowl. Stone structure, brown and orange, white, knocked down. I think what is interesting, right, about the Browns getting a new stadium eventually is, my thing is I want it to be well done. And honestly, like, I think a lot of people are married to the ideal of a retractable dome, but the retractable dome has been something that for every team that's had it has been kind of a waste of money. Like there are some teams that do use it, right? The Atlanta Falcons use theirs often. I think the Arizona Cardinals, Lucas Oil Stadium, I think they have a retractable roof in there, or if not, they have like some kind of retractable glass situation. I get the appeal of it, but I think if you look at something like how Minnesota has built that stadium, I think that's a more successful strategy for a cold weather city, because I don't think Lucas Oil Stadium is actually retractable. I think it's a fix, but it has a lot of windows to it. And I think you're seeing that in the North, one, because retractable domes are really hard to maintain. They're very hard to maintain in inclement weather where the Browns will be playing. We know that the Browns will be, like, if they built that stadium where the viewer suggests, which I think is a good idea, because you already have traffic lines that are already defined. You don't really have to change much to build the infrastructure to get to the stadium there. If you built the stadium there, then that's going to be all in good. But the one thing with the retractable roof is you're building it next to a large body of water that produces a lot of snow during the winter, which means that a lot of the materials for the building are just going to age a little bit quickly, especially if you have a ton of moving parts there. I think Minnesota has done a beautiful job of still maintaining that feeling of feeling like you're outside while being a completely closed roof stadium. You look at some of the other teams that have them, like NRG Stadium in Houston, they never opened a dome there because the moving parts have gotten so rusty or whatever. There's like an issue with opening the dome there. Like, I don't think they've done it in years. And usually the retractable dome just doesn't end up being used as much as people want it to, unless it's like very small. And if you look at Atlanta's retractable section in their dome, it's a tiny section compared to the whole stadium. It's not like it opens up a whole partition over the field where you can get snow and all that stuff in. And honestly, we're not going to be letting snow in into a retractable dome kind of situation. So I'm not set on the retractable domeness of it. I would love just a domed stadium done right. Get some glass in there. If you want to build it to make it look like a doghouse, or if you want to build it to make it look a little industrial, kind of like new age industrial, that's dope. That's really cool. Like I kind of like what they did with Rocket Mortgage, where they kind of put the glass in front of there. Like, I just want it to be really nice. And I think there are ways to make it really nice that don't have to be a retractable dome. And I don't think I think the retractable dome element can actually hold back the design and the atmosphere of the stadium more than it would help at this point, especially when you're looking at it being in a cold weather city, being used in the cold weather, because there are some baseball stadiums in this part of the country that have retractable domes with retractable roofs. But baseball is played when it's warm. So when you're moving that roof out, it makes more sense to do it there because you're not doing it in the snow. In Cleveland, you will be doing that a lot in the wintertime. So that's my one thing with the retractable domeness of it. I would just rather have a fixed dome. The next set of comments come from, should the Browns draft for need or best player? This is a interesting video. This first comment is from Mr. Tim, who says, "Hey Quincy, on the ideal of drafting best player available versus position of need, do you think the best player available should still apply to a team like the Chiefs or Bills or potentially the Browns, where they already have a franchise quarterback, or should they go with another high value player trade now?" It depends on where you're at, right? If I'm the Kansas City Chiefs and I'm in like losing a bunch of players, right, then drafting for need makes a little bit more sense. But if you feel like you're in the Cleveland Browns situation where the roster is complete, you have not lost all of your expensive players yet, like you're in that window of win now, it makes more sense to get the best player available, in my opinion, because you're trying to maximize your short-term potential to win a championship, because that's what you're trying to do, right? If you like get a bunch of like supporting players that can't help you, you might not get what you need. And that's my whole point, is the Browns are at a point in this build where best player available makes a lot more sense than just trying to fill a bunch of positions in the draft. Maybe after the Browns get their first round picks back, after this window is kind of being reset, it makes sense. But as of right now, to me, it doesn't make very much sense to keep going and trying to get more picks. This video was about Andrew Berry being reported to be very aggressive in free agency. A lot of interesting comments here. Base player 1966 says, "Q, have you seen Josh Gordon play over the last couple of weeks in the XFL? He's made some really good catches, caught the game-winning touchdown last game." Of course, yeah, I've been watching all of the XFL. I'm very interested in the XFL. I think the XFL is very entertaining. I think they play football the way that they manage the game from a rules standpoint and keep that game going quickly makes the game very entertaining and very, very watchable. And if NFL games were managed like that, I think the product would be so much more entertaining for, and like maybe us as fans wouldn't like it because it changes the rules and it makes us more anxious about our team's ability to win. But if we're looking at this from a pure entertainment standpoint, the XFL has a better structure and better game management framework on how to run their games than the NFL, in my opinion. Like, it's so much easier to watch 3 XFL games than it is to watch 3 NFL games or 3 college football games. It's ridiculous. It's not even close, quite honestly. Like, it's not close how much easier the XFL is to watch because of how they lay out their games versus the other two major football sports. And this is somebody who watches a ton of football. All levels, FCS, Power 5, Group of 5, high school. Like, I'm telling you, the XFL has figured out the most TV friendly way to play a football game. That's in the XFL. Nobody does it better than them. It was like that in 2020. It's like that right now. It is a very, very watchable format on how they play it. And you don't even notice the changes unless you're looking for them. I mean, like, you notice like the kickoff rules are different. That's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to the game management stuff. The game management stuff, you don't really think about it until you're like forced to think about it. But that's the beauty of it, because it just keeps those games moving. And it's beautiful. For a pure entertainment standpoint, I would love it if they brought that to the NFL. As a fan, it would make me more anxious because it's less time to make plays. There will be less possessions in games. So they're not going to do it for those reasons. But as a fan, that's the way you want football to be played if you want it to be very watchable on your television set, the way the XFL does it. G.I. George says the window is now. My question is, how long can we keep the window open? It seems that they have it shut very quickly in the LA. Seems like the goal of the Super Bowl worked against maintaining a winning culture. I don't know. Maybe I'm putting the cart before the horse too. Yeah, I mean, like, are we really going to care? Like, seriously, I asked that question. I'd rather have a Super Bowl victory, like just win the Super Bowl next year, than like, oh, well, we have a Super Bowl culture and a winning culture. We got a Super Bowl, dog. Like, that's the goal. You know, you want to be the Steelers and be decent for the next 20 years, but like haven't won anything since what, 2010? I'm good. I'd rather just win now. You know what I mean? But like, also, I think the Rams are a bad example because half their team went away in free agency. That's not the Browns situation. After that Super Bowl, also they were a very old team. Also, Matt Stafford is old when he won that Super Bowl. If Deshaun Watson wins that Super Bowl next year, he's not going to be old. So I think that's a completely different situation. That's a team that got old, injured, and had a lot of free agents on it, on 1-year deals. So that's why that kind of broke away quickly. And the Rams have been decent for a while. Like, who's to say that Sean McVay's football teams don't have a winning culture? You know, I think there's a lot of bad assumptions in there, in this comment that kind of are short-sighted because the Rams don't have a losing culture. They didn't have it before. They don't have it now. Yes, they didn't have a great season last year, but one bad season doesn't automatically make Sean McVay a loser. He's been to the Super Bowl twice. He's won one. Obviously, they had an old quarterback who got hurt this year. So that's going to ruin your chance of Deshaun gets hurt next year or the year after he wins the Super Bowl. Yeah, we're going to stink. Of course. He's Deshaun. Like, we're going to stink if we don't have our quarterback. So I don't think that the basis of this comment is even correct. But even then, it's like, who cares, man? Who cares how decent the team is after they win the Super Bowl? Like, maybe if we talking about 5 years after the Super Bowl, we going to care. But like, the year after, like, hey, if they stink, they stink. We still gonna be in Cleveland. You think we just gonna celebrate that Super Bowl for 2 months? We will celebrate that Super Bowl for like at least 5 years. And you know how I know this? Because we've celebrated the wild card game for like 2. Okay, like, this video is about no, the Browns should not trade Nick Chubb. Still surprised I had to make this video. Buckeye Steve says, I'm really struggling to wrap my head around Twitter, how Twitter went from run Nick Chubb on every play to trade Nick Chubb for some dude in a matter of 2 months. Impressive. This is what happened this is what happens when we don't have football to watch. When we're not watching Nick Chubb play football, it's easy to say things that undervalue his level of play. It's real easy to say, well, Nick Chubb doesn't help you win games. Well, you ain't watching him help you win games, right? This is what happens. It happens with draft prospects. It happens with football. It happens with everything. The further away you get from football being played, the easier it is to lie about the football that was played. Because you can lie with numbers. You can lie with all these things. What you can't lie about is when Nick Chubb breaks 8 tackles and gets 70 yards in one run. You can't lie about that. But you can lie about it at this portion of it. Or not lie, but lie to yourself about it. The impact that has. It's much easier to believe it when you're not watching him play football every week. And that happens every year in the offseason where we think this is why like great players get traded for like 5th round picks during this portion, because even it happens to GMs where they're just like, oh yeah, why would I want DeAndre Hopkins when I can have 2 3rd-round picks? Lincoln Adams says, you broke me when you reminded me that the Browns drafted Miles and could have had Miles and Deshaun Watson in the same draft without trading up, only to give up 3 first-round picks later. And the beauty of that was like we only had the 12th pick that year because we did a trade, and then we traded the 12th pick to get another pick. And they ended up working out a little bit because you got Denzel Ward out the pick there. But then to get the player that you passed on at 12, you had to trade 3 more first-round picks. So no, it actually didn't work out. You know what I mean? Like, this is what trading back gets you. When you trade back, you end up just trading for the players that you should have drafted in the first place. Like, that's what happens when you trade back. You use those assets to then draft the player that you could have just used 1 first-round pick on. But now you're using 3 on. But you traded back, so you got multiple. It's hilarious that happens like more than it really should. Where would the Browns spend money next week was another video that I did. I think I brought in Jared Mueller for this one. He's a great guest. I got game says I know this probably won't happen, but I hope we have Hargrave, Yannick Ngakoue, Gardner Johnson, and we can just add D-Hop. My man, hey, look, man, shooting for the stars is something that I applaud, and I applaud your inability to be realistic about this. I applaud that. You know what I mean? Another question comes from George, who says, Quincy was slot corner an issue, and Greg Newsome not willing to commit to the position. What prospects do you see coming out that could be for the Dogs? Maybe at pick 98. All right, man. Here's the thing about slot corner. I've been trying to say this for years. You don't draft somebody to be a slot corner. Slot corners become slot corners. You don't draft somebody because you think they can play slot corner. You draft somebody to be corner, and then they find out they slot corner. You look at all the best slot corners in the league. They're like either late round picks or undrafted. That's not a mistake. Because there's some positions in football where analytics are going to help you and the numbers and the stats are going to help you. There are some positions in football that are just a fight. And you got to find people who like to fight for those positions. And slot corner is one of those positions. That's why Greg Newsome, despite being very talented, wasn't a good fit for that position, because ultimately nobody who's talented enough to play on the outside plays inside and does it well. Because there's a lot of, I ain't got to do this in that position. There's a lot of dirty work that you have to do in that position. And players who can play on the boundary ain't trying to do all that dirty work because they're used to protecting themselves, because their ability to be on the field is more important than making a tackle on first down against a running back. Like, that is usually how that goes. It's not a slight to anybody. There's a reason why the best slot corners in football are almost always late round undrafted guys. Go look it up. Go look up Pro Football Focus, top 10 slot corners, and then look where every single one of those guys were drafted. I don't think a single one of those are like top 100 picks. You just don't find those guys. Like, you don't draft those guys to be slot corners. You find out if somebody can be a slot corner. That's a much different position. So you're not going to draft somebody with the specific idea that they're going to be a slot corner. What you can do is draft the corner and find out, oh, he a slot in the NFL. Or maybe that corner finds out he's a slot in the NFL. But it's not something where it's like, hey, we're just going to plug this guy in and we're going to draft somebody in the 3rd round to do that. Nah, man. You got to go late round and just a dude trying to make the roster. MJ Stewart was a pretty good slot for us. He was on his last leg in his NFL career, right? You look at Troy Hill, undrafted. Like Mike Hilton, undrafted. Well, no, Mike Hilton was late round or undrafted, something like that. But still not very, if he wasn't undrafted, he was very close to being undrafted. Like, there's a reason that dynamic exists. And it's because that's one of the want-to positions. That's one of the positions you only play if you got to, because it's really physical for a small player. What we learned from the Kevin Stefanski interview, this was an interesting video. Listened to the interview this morning. Loved his recalling of growing up in Philly and family attending Eagles and Vikings games. Genuine good dude, though. I hope Kevin and his coaching staff and the Browns can deliver. Me too. Joey with a very long comment who says, I'm glad you touched on this. Fans need to get over Kevin Stefanski's emotional status and realize that this guy is very rational and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I would most agree. I think most would agree that this is a good thing. The guy can focus his job in the heat of the moment and make rational decisions without being in a blinding rage of emotions getting in the way. Just because you don't show your emotions doesn't mean that they aren't there. They are just in check, which means he could process them quickly, frustrate feelings or negatively, and affect his actions and decisions, maybe the most importantly affecting the environment around him in a negative way. Who wants a role model or an uncontrollable mess? I think that, look, this doesn't have to be one way or the other. I think if you're a coach, the most important thing to be is yourself, because we all have flaws in how we react to things. We all have flaws in how we respond to adverse situations. But if we're aware of our flaws, we know how to work around them. And if you're being true to yourself, yeah, if you're a screaming person, you know how to work around it, right? Like, there are plenty of coaches who scream and yell, but then they'll come back and say something more heartfelt to the player in a softer tone after they get done with their screaming and yelling bit, right? Like, I'm not saying one way is bad and this is the way to do it, how Kevin does it, but how Kevin does it is the way for Kevin to do it. And I think too many people want Kevin to change into what they want him to be instead of accepting who he is. You have to meet people where they're at. And if you are doing a job that involves leadership, you have to be who you are. Because the second you start stepping outside of that to try to project some kind of energy that you don't have internally, people smell that and they stop listening, right? So if you're Mr. Screaming and you decided not to scream just because you tired of people talking about how you screaming, like, people don't think what's wrong with you. Why you ain't doing what you normally do? I know you, right? But if you're Mr. like Kevin who don't really do that, and all of a sudden you chewing dudes out, they're not gonna respect that either. You gotta be who you are. There's no one way to be a successful leader except for being who you are and being self-aware enough to know the pros and the cons of what that brings to the table and how to work around it. That's why it's important to be yourself, because you know how to work around your flaws better than anybody else. And if you're being yourself, you're going to be in a position to work around what you don't do well because you've had to do it before if you're being true to yourself. I hope my point is clear on that. To this video, should the Browns pursue Adam Thielen? Boy, y'all don't like Adam Thielen at all. The comment sections were very aggressively hostile towards him. I don't know what he did to y'all, but like, okay, 32 turn to 35 is insane. Yeah, I thought I was saying 32.5 because that's what his age is on Pro Football Focus. So, yeah, I guess I made a mistake there. Only one Zay also had this one, says, I know he's underutilized last year, but David Bell is also a slot. Adam would hurt Bell's development. Yeah, David Bell's kind of become a forgotten man in this whole conversation. And I don't think that's, if we look at what Andrew Berry, how long he held on to Anthony Schwartz, I don't think he's just going to give up on David Bell after 1 year. So a lot of these like moves that are assuming the Browns are going to like be okay with not giving David Bell snaps by bringing in this guy, I just don't think are going to happen, because I think Andrew Berry still believes in David Bell. But that's it for this week's commentary. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have a great night.